it's Nina. Thanks for joining me today. I'm really excited to be back with you today. I'm going to be sharing a card featuring the new Simon Says stamp August 2017 card kit. And in today's video, we're going to be working with Distress Oxide inks, which everybody is really excited about because Oxide inks are so popular and have really hit the ground running when they came out earlier this year. So in today's card, I'm going to show you how you can use Distress Oxide inks to create a unique effect on dark colored cardstocks. So when you use Distress Oxide inks, the purpose of Oxide inks is that they are a dye and pigment fusion. So what happens is when you add water to that mix, it creates an oxidized effect. So it has more of a cloudier substance to it, and it almost reminds you of a chalk finish. So we're going to explore that today, and I'm going to show you how you can use the Oxide inks to their advantage because of that pigment fusion on dark colored cardstocks. Because if you try this with regular dye inks, you wouldn't get the same effect. It would totally not show up on your paper because it's so dark. But with the pigment fusion, you get that really cool, vibrant effect, plus it has an oxidized effect. So I'm going to show you how I created the cards today and using those Oxide inks, and let's get started and check it out. Alright, so what you see me have here is the new Simon Says stamp You Plus Me stamp set, and I also have the embossing powder that's included in the kit on my desk as well. I'm going to start off my cards by creating two A2 card bases from some slate gray cardstock, which is included in the kit. I've cut those down in half, so they were 8.5 and 11 sheets, and I cut them down in half vertically to create the two A2 size cards, so they end up having a top fold. After I scored the cardstocks and created my bases, I'm taking the border stamp and I'm going to align this onto my card base and start creating a pattern. I want to create a chevron pattern with this border, and I'm going to be doing all of my stamping, like I already mentioned, with the Distress Oxide inks. In the kit, you get cracked pistachio, so I'm using that one first, and I'm going to pair it with a bit of salty ocean. I'm stamping the ink onto my slate gray cardstock, and I'm making sure I press this down really good so I get a nice smooth coverage. You usually get a smooth coverage with these Oxide inks and the stamping simply because they have a pigment fusion in them, so that pigment ink stamps really nicely. Whereas if you tried to stamp with the regular Distress inks, you would probably get a little bit more of a splotchier stamping with a clear stamp like this because it's just a plain dye ink. So it's not going to stamp perfectly smooth, whereas pigment does. So I'm going to go ahead and continue stamping this border stamp all the way up and down this piece of gray cardstock. I'm alternating the colors, and I'm kind of putting a little bit of a spacing interest in between these stripes. So I've got two stripes that are really close together, and then I put a bigger space in between the next set of two stripes, and that creates a really unique effect on the background. I also want to show you how you can use other colors of the Distress Oxide inks and how they appear on the dark colored cardstock. So right now I'm pulling out some fossilized amber. I'm also going to add some spiced marmalade and that cracked pistachio. So I'm going to start off first by mounting this into my Misty once again. This is another slate gray cardstock card base. I'm going to bring in the fossilized amber, and I'll ink up that stamp, making sure I get it completely covered. And then I'll go ahead and stamp this down onto my cardstock. Now you do notice I've been getting ink onto my Misty mousepad insert. The Misty mousepad insert has a laminated surface, so it's really easy to clean. You can clean it off with a baby wipe, and then a lot of times I usually will every so often take some stamp cleaner and give it a nice spray down and scrub it off really good just to make sure I get off any excess ink that's sitting on the surface. I'm now bringing in that spiced marmalade like I said, and this time I'm arranging the stripes onto this background very close together throughout the entire card base. So I want the entire piece to have some really close together stripes to create a different background than the one we just created previously. Finally, I'm going to bring in that cracked pistachio. I loved how these colors matched so nicely together. The cracked pistachio with the orange and the yellow. It ended up creating a really nice, pretty mix. So I want to create a unique effect with the oxidation part of these inks. So I'm going to use a shimmer spritz for this, but you could use just plain water. And I'm going to give this a nice little spritz, making sure I get it completely coated. I'm going to give this a good heat with my heat gun to make sure I've gotten all of that sparkle dry. And as it dries, you'll notice that the ink now has a little bit more of a chalkier finish to it. And that's what happens when you use the Distress Oxide inks and add water to them. If you use them without adding the water, you'll just have an ink appearance. But when you add the water, it creates a chalk-like oxidation, which is so cool. Here I'm bringing in some of those Oxide inks onto a plastic palette, and I'm going to flick them all over my backgrounds to create some splatter effects. Again, because I have the water mixed into this ink, it's going to dry with an oxidized quality. So you notice when I have this completely dried, how it has a chalk-like finish to those dots, and the dots have a little bit more of a cloudier look than they do right now. Right now they look very vibrant, but as they dry, that's when the oxidization shows up and really has a unique finish to it. So here's a look at the two cards, and that blue one especially, that one's completely dry, and you can see the oxidized effect on those dots. I'm going to bring in some small stars, and these are some really nice confetti stars from Simon Says Stamp. I'm going to use my Sizzix Sidekick machine. This is a mini die cutting machine. It's perfect for using small dies like this when I don't have to break out the big one. I'll just go ahead and run those through with some of the yellow cardstock that's included in the kit, and that's going to leave me with a bunch of stars. And I ended up die cutting these stars twice, so that way I have a couple of each star so I can layer them on top of each other, and I have enough for both cards. So after I've die cut the stars, I'm going to stamp my sentiments. I've cut the You plus Me equals awesome stamp apart so that I can stamp it in two different colors. So I want to stamp the awesome part of the sentiment in that glitter embossing powder, and then the rest of the sentiment I want to be in just white. So I first stamped the awesome word in the clear Simon Says Stamp embossing ink. I'll add some of that glitter embossing powder on top and then heat set this. And you'll notice that the embossing powder gets a little bit more of a shinier finish to it once it's completely melted. So you'll just make sure that you heat this really well until you notice that shinier finish, and then you want to stop adding the heat because you don't want to overheat emboss the sentiment. Now here I messed up on the stamping of the You plus Me on that bottom set of sentiments, so I ended up having to restamp that entire thing. But what I did was I stamped the You plus Me sentiment, and I added some white embossing powder. You can see I pressed a little too hard and I ended up with a smudge there on the O. But that's okay, I just restamped that entire thing one more time. And then I was able to take the sentiments and trim them out using some fine tip scissors. And I did all the stamping onto some more slate gray cardstock. Here I'm taking the stars and some liquid glue, and I'm going to glue these on, and I'm putting 2 layers of stars together. So that way I have a little bit of extra dimension on the stars. After I've added the stars down, I'm also bringing in some Nouveau drops in both orange and Caribbean blue, and I'm adding little dots onto this card. Now on the other card, I ended up using green instead of the orange, but either way, I just added little dots onto the cards just to add a little bit of interest around the stars. I also added some Spectrum Noir clear glitter onto each of the little stars and also some glossy accents, and once that dried, that added a nice shiny finish to the stars. And that finishes up these cards. These were clean and simple, but I wanted them that way so that the Distress Oxide inks had center stage, and the effect of that really cool pattern that we created with the Oxide inks really put such a big bang on these cards. It looks so cool. So I hope that today's card has inspired you to create some fun cards using the Simon Says Stamp card kit, as well as getting some ideas for using Distress Oxide inks. Thanks so much for watching this video. Please give it a big thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more inspiration. I'll see you again very soon. Bye!